early this morning today, the Bear fired not one, but two missiles with a virtual nuclear warhead against Crane Capital. I want to show you something, guys, really quick. Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Luis. Today is November 17, 2022, and welcome to the Grand Supreme News channel. Before I start, guys, give this video a big thumbs up and share this video. We got some breaking news updates, and guys, we have some huge information coming out. Early this morning today, the Bear fired not one, but two missiles with a virtual nuclear warhead against Crane Capital. I want to show you something, guys, really quick. So it says here, give me a second. It says here, however, this particular missile did not contain any warhead. Instead, it contained a nuclear combat unit simulator. So this was a message. This was a message to the Sleeping Giant, NATO, and Crane forces. We launched two fake dummies. We launched two of, again, missiles that are supposed to be nukes but didn't have nuclear warhead. Next time, they will have them. So they were, I wouldn't say afraid, they were shocked. We talking about the Sleeping Giant, NATO, all them, they were doing their investigation. They were shocked to find this in Crane Capital. What's the picture at? Give me a second here. Guys, here we go. That's the one right there. So the Bear sent a strong message. Next time, it will be the real deal. Alright guys, before I start, give this video a big thumbs up. Share this video with your friends, families, and loved ones. The Yellow and Blue Country. Remember what he said yesterday. I truly apologize, guys. Give me a second here. He blamed the Bear. He blamed the Bear for the strike going on in one that hit in Poland. He blamed that on the Bear. So I believe the Bear is sending a strong message to that leader and saying, be careful what you say. Give me a second here, guys. All right, so it is a strong message, guys. I mean, just imagine the Big Apple seeing something like that. Many people will be spooked and say, hey, you know, this again, this was scary, you know. All right. And also, guys, I got another video coming up really quick. I already made a video. It's already ready to be uploaded. But I just want to give you guys a quick update on this one here. I mentioned that the Bear is taking out the bridge, but it's not the Bear. It's the Yellow and Blue Country forces. They are taking out the bridge. They are also building walls in certain areas because the Bear forces and Belarus forces are coming in. Look, did you know they're coming in? So you have this country, the Yellow and Blue Country, are building ready to be uploaded. But I just want to give you guys a quick update on this one here. I mentioned that the Bear is taking out the bridge, but it's not the Bear. It's the Yellow and Blue Country forces. They are taking out the bridge. They are also building walls in certain areas because the Bear forces and Belarus forces are coming in. So you have this country, the Yellow and Blue Country, are building walls. They're taking out bridges. So I made a video, but with all the code words, I got confused. I said that the Bear is taking out the bridges. So it's not the Bear, it's Crane. So I truly apologize about that, guys. And again, you know, I mentioned this sometime as journalists. Sometimes we do make mistakes, but it's always good to man up and admit your mistakes. So again, that video is going to come out after this one here. All right, so let's see what's going on in this here. The Bear is not playing around no more. A few hours ago, NATO and Crane officials found themselves in front of a terrifying discovery as they located the wreckage of a Bear missile carrying a virtual nuclear warhead. This missile fell in the vicinity of the capital. That is a message. A strong. The wreckage of a Bear missile carrying a virtual nuclear warhead. This missile fell in the vicinity of the capital. That is a message. A strong message. The Bear, they meant to send them 2 missiles and say, here you go. Next time, it'll be the real deal. So be quiet, Pinocchio. You keep pointing finger at us. So the Bear, during the large scale impacting yesterday morning on the 15th of the month, proceeded to simulate a nuclear strike against the Yellow and Blue country. In fact, the Bear fired not 1, but supposedly 2 of the missiles simply without a nuclear warhead. It is the first use of the Bear NUKE arsenal in the Crane theater of operation, even for the requirements of a simulation. My goodness. So according to the first info early on Tuesday morning, the Crane Armed Forces took down 2 cruise missiles. One of them was the KH-55 model, which is the Bear designation of KX-55, developed to carry a nuclear payload. However, this particular missile did not contain any warhead. Instead, it contained a nuclear combat unit simulator. The shock is simply enormous, both in Crane and in the neighboring NATO countries. I mean, guys, nobody want to get a message like that. You got mail. I mean, just imagine you walking in Times Square and then you see something like that lands, and the Bear is saying, yeah, next time it'd be the real deal. So they did not use the KH-55.
Belarus joining in on this war and declaring war on Ukraine. And with this, we actually have Russia declaring full-on war on Ukraine. Now, Russia isn't using all of its military. It's using a small portion of it. Therefore, if they get their entire military involved, they would most likely be able to roll over Ukraine. And, well, I wouldn't say roll over, but they'd most likely have a lot more progress. So with Russia's full military involved, we have them breaking through any stalemates along here in the east and meeting up with the Dnieper River. Belarusian troops move into the Kyiv region as well as northern Ukraine, and at this point, Ukraine is suffering a massive invasion. Russian and Belarusian troops push over towards Kyiv, and the Battle of Kyiv starts. Down south, they push across the Dnieper River and start to invade mainland Ukraine, and it is at this point that we have an interesting scenario playing out. Now, Russia has been making some interesting statements as of recently. A lot of people within the government and their Kremlin-run news network have suggested that the Nazifying NATO would be a priority. Now, this hasn't come from the official government, such as Putin himself, but it is kind of concerning to see that within the government-controlled news. It's most likely just talk, but we're going to assume that it isn't. As Belarus and Russia push down into western Ukraine, we have the start of the capitulation of Ukraine itself. It is at this time that Russia and Belarus make the decision to start their invasion of Poland. Now, Poland is considered a target by Russia in real life, yes, but they would probably not dare to invade, as Poland is a member of NATO. But in this scenario, Russian and Belarusian troops push across the border as Poland is forced to start mobilization. One day after the invasion starts, Article 5 of NATO is activated, and all 30 member states join in. Now, all of NATO is starting to mobilize and send troops into Europe, where they hope to beat back the Russians and push them back to Moscow. At this time, NATO's support and unity for each other is at an all-time high, and patriotism within the alliance runs high. This is the first ever time NATO has been activated in a global conflict. I guess the war on terror wasn't really a global thing, it was more of a centered in the Middle East thing, but this will lead into a global conflict. So this is the first time that NATO has been called into a global conflict. I'm also just realizing that I didn't color in the Baltics, and then I accidentally colored in Sweden, but that's okay because we're going to assume that Sweden and Finland join the war on NATO's side. So yeah, now we have Russia versus Europe. Russian troops immediately start operations in the Baltic states, and down in Ukraine, the country is split in half. We have the Red Team meeting up with Kaliningrad and pushing out into Lithuania, who would soon capitulate over to the Russians. Followed by this, we have a slow but steady squeeze up into Latvia and Estonia, and then we have the capturing of Riga. From here, Western Latvia falls, and now we have Latvian and Estonian troops on the withdrawal. Mainland Estonia completely falls, and troops are forced to evacuate to these 2 Estonian islands. The Russians push out from Kaliningrad and down into Poland. While back over in Ukraine, Russians push down to capture Odessa. In Finland, Russian troops cross over the border and start to invade Finland. And yeah, Russia seems to be doing very good here. But we do have to realize that Russia's army was already mobilized and in the process of invading Ukraine. It's not too unlikely that Russia would be able to transport these troops around pretty quickly and start invading surrounding countries. It's also probably likely that they already had troops along the border of these countries, whereas NATO, who was kind of on alert, really isn't mobilized for this war. But now at this point, they are mobilized and they are ready to push these borders back. Starting off in Finland, we have Finnish troops pushing out the Russians, and back in Poland, we have Polish troops pushing back Belarusian troops. NATO struggles to push back the Kaliningrad offensive, but they do make progress towards Belarus. In Estonia, a NATO naval landing is made, which ends up capturing the capital of Estonia. From here, another one is made over here in the top of Latvia. This also goes successful, and they managed to capture Riga. And also, I'm not really going to cover naval too much because there isn't really much aspect to it. It's more of a land-based war, but NATO has complete control over the Baltic Sea, and as well as a majority of the Black Sea, although it is kind of contested. Over in Ukraine, Romanian and Ukrainian troops make a slight offensive back towards Russia, which ends up capturing Odessa. Back over in mainland Ukraine, we have the Russian troops steamrolling through the countryside. Eventually, these troops start to push down into northern Romania. Basically, all of Ukraine has been lost to Russia, except for the small sliver of land over here, and in the Odessa area. Back in the Baltics, we have NATO troops linking up and making one big united Baltic front. But it's at this point that the war gets interesting. Russia starts to call in allies as they realize that they can't beat NATO, and the most likely event for them even coming close to winning is stalemating. So with this, to get a hold of CSTO members, these members include Belarus, who is already in the war, Armenia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan is also a member, but they are in conflict with Kyrgyzstan in some sort of way, so I doubt they would join in aid of them. And as for the rest of Central Asia, they decide to stay out of the war. But with Armenia joining the war, we have Azerbaijan joining the war, as they are not with good terms with Armenia. We also have Georgia joining this war, who has already lost some land over to Russia. And with these three countries joining in, we have the ignition of a Middle Eastern front. Iran declares war on Turkey, and from here everything falls apart. We have Saudi Arabia in turn declaring war on Iran. The UAE and Qatar come to the assistance of NATO. Yemen officially declares war on Saudi Arabia. Oman comes to Saudi Arabia's aid. Kuwait joins the war as requested by the United States. Jordan decides to pick a side. Iran convinces Iraq to join. And Syria is caught up in the mess along with Lebanon. In support of NATO and their ally, the United States, we have Israel joining, which in turn makes Palestine have to pick a side. And what I would consider to be all the Middle East, except for Egypt, has not picked a side in the war. Now, I do want to expand this over to Africa, because I don't have much coverage of Africa in pretty much any of my videos. So, we're going to be having Morocco join, and they're joining the side of NATO because they mostly have good relations with the United States. Well, with Morocco joining, we have Algeria joining the war on the side of Russia due to bad relations with Morocco. I also believe that I can make this stem into a East African war with Egypt and Ethiopia. However, I don't know how to really pick out the sides here because the alignment of these countries is really interesting. Especially with Egypt, who has good relations with the US and Russia, and it's kind of like an India in this scenario where they hold relations with both and really want to split either way in order to betray one of their allies. So Egypt will be staying out of this war, but if you want to let me know in the comments, let me know what side you think Egypt would be on in this conflict so far.
Kathy broke up with you? But why?
Because I...
Welcome back to Military Update Channel. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is already one of the most destructive and lethal wars in recent memory, from the shelling of cities to the use of thermobaric vacuum weapons. That's led experts and civilians alike to wonder what, if NATO and the US become directly involved in the conflict, nuclear war between Washington and Moscow might look like. Here, Military Update examines two classic nuclear attack scenarios: a counterforce strike and a counter-value strike. The counterforce scenario examines what might happen if Russia attacked America's nuclear arsenal with its own in an attempt to neutralize America's nuclear-capable bombers, submarines, and land-based missiles. The second, more devastating counter-value scenario involves an all-out use of nukes to destroy the United States' ability to wage war, with the side effect of reducing American society to a pre-industrial level of development. Before we begin, we should note that neither of the scenarios is likely to occur in our lifetimes. Unlike conventional war, nuclear war is not something that happens out of the blue. Both the United States and Russia believe that a nuclear war is not winnable and should never be fought. Both countries also subscribe to a policy of assured destruction, meaning any attack on either nation would result in the attacker's destruction. Assured destruction is a powerful disincentive to using even just one nuclear weapon, let alone using hundreds in an apocalyptic attack. Still, nuclear war is not impossible. The United States has been steadfast in its refusal to become directly involved in the Russo-Ukrainian war, and for good reason. Under Article 5 of NATO's founding treaty, Washington has extended the protection of its nuclear umbrella to NATO nations, which means the U.S. would treat a nuclear attack on those countries in the same way it would an attack on American soil. In other words, it protects them by promising to retaliate in kind to any nuclear strikes on their territory. However, the U.S. does not have the same security relationship with Ukraine as it does with NATO member nations and allies, such as South Korea and Japan. As a result, Ukraine has found itself with no country willing to actively defend it against nuclear-armed Russia for fear of entering into a nuclear war. Putin's Russia, seeing Ukraine as alone and vulnerable, decided to attack. In our scenario, the President of the United States has ordered the U.S. military to intervene on Ukraine's behalf, destroying Russian ground forces units in the field and downing Russian fighter jets. 5 U.S. Army brigades, backed up by fighters, bombers, and cruise missiles, drive from Poland to Kiev, then on to Donetsk. The intervention threatens to upset Putin's chessboard and injects a new force into the conflict that could beat Russia's army in the field. While this might result in a conventional victory, things could rapidly take a sinister turn. If U.S. forces routed their Russian counterparts and neared the Ukrainian-Russian border, Russia might target them with tactical nuclear weapons, typically 20,000 tons of TNT or less, to stop their advance. Once that happens, all bets are off. The United States might choose not to retaliate in order to avoid escalating, or it might well decide to retaliate with tactical nuclear weapons of its own. At that point, either side could opt to massively escalate, reasoning that the first side to use larger, more powerful strategic nuclear weapons could gain a survival advantage over the other, launching a first strike so devastating it destroys most of the enemy's strategic arsenal. All-out war. In our scenario, we'll look at a surprise nuclear first strike that leads to an all-out war. One country decides it has exhausted all other options and must destroy enemy nuclear forces before it can use them. We'll assume Russia strikes first. U.S. Strategic Early Warning Forces abruptly detect SS-19 intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, each loaded with a nuclear-armed Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle. Launched from silos near Orenburg, Russia, the 6 hypersonic weapons are not particularly accurate but loaded with devastating 2 megaton warheads, 2 million tons of TNT, so there's no need for pinpoint precision. Avangard hypersonic glide vehicles rain down on early warning radar bases across North America, destroying the sensors needed to detect the main surprise attack. Moments later, Russia launches its entire force of 304 land-based ICBMs, carrying a total of approximately 1,183 thermonuclear warheads. The ICBMs would target America's nukes, including the 400 ICBM silos sprinkled across the western United States, nuclear bomber bases in Missouri and Louisiana, and missile submarine bases at Kings Bay, Georgia, and Kitsap, Washington. Each location would likely receive a minimum of 2 nukes in case the first weapon fails to detonate. The nuclear surprise attack, known as a first strike, would primarily target America's land-based nuclear arsenal. Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota would receive at least 800 nuclear strikes between them. Cities like Seattle, uncomfortably close to Joint Base Kitsap, the home of the Pacific Fleet's ballistic missile submarines, would likely take some damage.
Hi, my name is Alina, and I would like to give you a few reasons why you should consider dating. A young Slavic lady. You can choose a potential spouse from Ukraine.
The strike, known as a counterforce strike, would be concentrated away from major population and industrial centers. Places like New York City, the San Francisco Bay Area, and entire regions of the U.S. would be spared. Such an attack would likely kill no more than 20 million Americans and leave much of the country intact. Most importantly, the strike would preserve Washington's ability to communicate with its nuclear forces. Moscow would then open a dialogue with Washington, stating that the bulk of American nuclear weapons, land-based missiles and bombers, have been destroyed, but America's infrastructure and cities are still intact. Russia's leadership would then warn that any attempt to retaliate would unleash the rest of the country's nuclear weapons, killing millions more and destroying the U.S. as a military, political, and economic entity. How bad would it get? At this point, the United States could surrender and face an uncertain future, or it could fight back. Fighting back would mean launching what remained of its ICBMs and any bombers that survive, using them to hunt down remaining Russian nuclear weapons. Bombers are particularly useful in this situation, as they could be used to actively hunt down what remained of Russia's ICBMs, particularly those like the SS-27 mounted on 16-wheeled missile transport trucks. The Navy would begin hunting Russian missile submarines, including those that might be parked off the east and west coasts of the U.S., armed with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Would a nuclear counterattack achieve anything? In our scenario, the Joint Chiefs of Staff argue that the United States has nothing to lose by trying, and in doing so, could attempt to reduce the overall damage of an inevitable second strike. After all, there is little reason to trust Russia at this point. The United States launches a counterstrike, but it is seriously hobbled by a lack of forces, with most of the U.S. Strategic Command's Minuteman III Ike bombs and B-2 and B-52 bombers destroyed in the first strike. Russia launches the remainder of its nukes, this time with an eye toward the destruction of anything that could contribute to the war effort. The strike targets America's remaining military bases, industry, energy, communications, and transportation facilities. Practically anything that makes 21st century life worth living. Cities are not targeted as population centers, but buildings, complexes, and other facilities inside them would be destroyed without mercy. The result would be near total devastation with global consequences. An attack on just one city in the U.S. could cause fatalities in the hundreds of thousands and just as many injuries. Tara Drizdenko, director of the Global Security Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, tells Popular Mechanics, fires generating soot could block sunlight, possibly for decades, causing global cooling and shortening growing seasons, causing worldwide food insecurity.